Hello everyone. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, and wherever you are. Hope you're having a great day. And I'm very excited for today's session in the implementation series. This is the 10th session in the series, and we have 2 more lined up for this year. In today's session, we have our amazing MVP, Mateusz. I hope I said your name right, Mateusz.
Perfect, fine.
So there are many interesting use cases that Mateusz has listed out, and I can't wait to listen to him. But before we get started, I wanted to cover a couple of things. The session is going to be recorded and it will be uploaded to the YouTube channel, Trailblazing Together. And all the previous sessions are also uploaded to the playlist. I'm going to share that playlist link in the chat window shortly. And please register for the next 2 sessions as well. The next session is by Vlad about the mobile studio use cases. And the other session is about the end-to-end implementation of the Marketing Cloud and also the possible integrations with the Marketing Cloud. So those 2 are also going to be very useful for you. So be sure to register. And if any questions you have, please post them in the chat window. And after the session also, you can post the questions in the Slack channel. I hope you're all part of the Slack channel. If you're not, please let me know. I will share the link to the Slack channel. And with that, we can get started. And I would like to take this opportunity and thank Mateusz for spending his time and also sharing his valuable insights. And I'm sure these use cases are going to be really, really helpful to you all. And thank you very much, Mateusz. I'll turn it over to you.
It's a pleasure. Hello, everyone. Just now already mentioned that the recording will be available. The slides will be available as well, and all the code that I will be showing during the session will be available as well. So don't worry, everything will be provided to you after the session. And with that said, let's jump to the slides and then the demo part. So the title for today's session is When AppExchange is Right and What to Do When It's Wrong. But actually, it will be with a bit more emphasis on what to do when it's wrong. So the idea here is to just showcase the general idea when the AppExchange might be the right solution, but the main focus for today will be how to build your own custom solution when what you want is not on the AppExchange. My name is Mateusz Dabrowski. As just already said, I am the Marketing Cloud Architect at PwC, Salesforce MVP, marketing champion, and author of the Mateusz Dabrowski.pl blog. And today we'll be talking firstly about a bit of a context regarding where should you think about creating your solution, finding the solution to your problem, basics of the cloud page apps, so what it even is, how to think about this approach to the solution, what you can do with the first step of the cloud page apps, so the AppExchange menu magic, because creating the whole cloud page app is not all you can do. There is much more you can get with actually 1 minute of work. There will be information about how to secure your cloud page apps with the SSO and other solutions. And we will dive right into the logic, architecture, and the demo of the simple cloud page app on a single page and the complex cloud page app with the code to be shared. Finally, there will be some materials that you can leverage to learn more or to inspire yourself about possible solutions. And finally, there will be Q&A. I have the chat open, so when there will be some small questions related to what I am discussing at the moment, I will try to answer them right now, but anything bigger or a bit of outside of current flow will just stay for this last part, so don't worry. I will do my best to answer all the questions that you will share regarding the topic of today's session. With that said, let's jump to the solutioning one-on-one. And this is the most theoretical part about the context of when to even think about finding the solution to the feature, to the use case that you have at hand. And firstly, you should ask yourself a few basic questions. First, what it needs to do. So you have this use case that you need to deliver. And first, you need to understand what is the minimum valuable outcome, what is the ideal one, to understand what is the minimum and maximum bounds of what you need to deliver, because only when you know what you want to deliver, you will be able to find the best solution that will solve your need. Second part is how it needs to do it. And this is important because just because some approach can solve your issue, it doesn't mean it will solve it in a way that is fine for you or the business. The best case is that a lot of solutions, of course, can be solved with writing API calls and coding things. But in many cases, the business is not fine with using code. They want some user-friendly no-code solutions. And solutions using just the APIs will not be right for this specific client. So it's always super important to understand what is the context and how this solution needs to deliver the outcome so that it is digestible and useful for the client or your business stakeholders. Next part is to ask yourself where the solution needs to be delivered. Because of course, there are ways to deliver things within the Marketing Cloud, either with out-of-the-box solutions or with the custom solutions or AppExchange solutions. But there are also some things that just shouldn't be added to the Marketing Cloud because the Marketing Cloud is just not the right tool for the specific job. So for example, if you want to store massive amounts of data about all the transactions, Marketing Cloud is not where it should be. It's placed for either data warehouse, CDP/Genie, generally a tool that is built for storing and acting on the massive amount of data. So whenever you are thinking about the use case, you need to think also where it should be delivered. Fourth question is who needs to do it? And here the question is related to your skills, your resources. So if you already know what you need to implement and where you need to implement, the question is whether you or your team can do it, whether you have the time, the skills, the knowledge, or you need to, for example, outsource it and make it done by someone else just to match the deadlines that there are. And the final question that is super important is, of course, the budget. So does it have to be free? Can it be paid but cheap? Or your company is ready to pay whatever it takes as long as the return from the investments will be fine and will be indeed providing big value to the organization. With those 5 questions, we can find this graph that shows us which solution will be the best for the specific use case. So we have a feature requirement, a use case that we need to solve in our development. And of course, the first thing to check is whether we can deliver it with the out-of-box solution. Yeah, if you want to send email, no need to import external email solutions. Marketing Cloud can do it. If you want to work on providing, for example, auto suppression list, no need to use the API to find checks outside. There is a solution that you can request from a support to automatically suppress contacts by email from all your sends. So ask yourself whether it is in the Marketing Cloud. If it is, then the question is whether it is good enough. Example here, sure, you want to have as a feature drag and drop segmentation. You have such feature in the Marketing Cloud in form of a filtered data extensions, but is it good enough? It depends on the use case. If you have simple data model, probably yes. If you have complex data model with a lot of data extensions, it will not be good enough. So this is the very important part. And finally, whether it is easy enough. So just because it is available, it doesn't mean it will be easy enough for your customers. So for example, coming back to the segmentation topic, if the filter data extensions are not good enough, there is another out-of-the-box solution, query activities and SQL. But is it easy enough? Again, it depends. If you have technical users that can segment using SQL, it's a perfect solution. If not, the out-of-the-box solution from the Marketing Cloud will not be the right choice for you. So if you answered no on any of these steps, the next step is, of course, AppExchange to check whether there is something free. This will be a really short step because there is not that much free solutions in AppExchange for the Marketing Cloud, but there are some, so it's always worth to check and check whether they are good enough. Here, there are 2, I would say, great examples. Query Studio by Salesforce Labs that provides you perfect environment to test and train with SQL in an easy way. And the search app by DE Select that lets you find the paths to the data extensions. Both are free. and are quite good to implement in your solution to get it from AppExchange. If there is no solution for your need in the free AppExchange, the next step is to think about the custom. So first, can you build it? Do you have the skills and time? If you can, will the solution that you can deliver with your current time and skills will be good enough for your customers or your business stakeholders? Will it be cheaper than paid AppExchange? This is a very important question because while, of course, you can build, for example, a whole drag and drop segmentation solution in-house, the amount of time that it will take and the amount of the developers it will require might make it much, much more pricey than just getting the already existing solution that is available in AppExchange. And finally, even if it will be cheaper in AppExchange, or maybe especially if it will be cheaper than AppExchange, the question is whether it will be well maintained and will keep working on after all the releases and will be secured all the time. If all the answers are yes, of course, custom solution is the right way to go. If any answer is no, we got to the paid AppExchange. So it's time to check whether there are some paid applications that are good enough, that are within our budget, and if yes, it's time for a purchase. Of course, there can be some cases where you still say, no, there is not good enough, or it just doesn't exist at all. And in this case, it's time to update requirements to be able to get yourself in one of those steps and be able to deliver the solution that is needed. With this very theoretical part, let's jump to the more interesting parts of today's presentation. So what we will be focusing today will be this custom part, what to do when the solution is not in the free AppExchange and it is not complex enough or it is specific enough that building a custom solution is the best way to go for a specific feature. So the solution that I want to propose in today's session is the Cloud Page Apps. And this is actually a trick to leverage something that you already have in your Marketing Cloud to deliver a solution that is not in it by using the languages that your developers, Marketing Cloud developers, already know to minimize the time to market, to minimize the maintenance needs, to not worry about scalability or hosting or security, because you can leverage a lot of things that are already built within the Marketing Cloud and make the most out of them. So what the Cloud Page App is. First, it consists of two parts, I would say. The first part is the Cloud Page part, and it is either just a single Cloud Page or a Cloud Page plus code resource, depending on what level of complexity your solution will need. We will cover both examples later on in the session. It consists of a modern frontend, meaning HTML, CSS, JavaScript, or if you want, even you can import Vue, React, Angular to make the frontend experience of your application. And it consists of SSJS and or IAMP backend that will be building the logic blocks of your solution. On the other hand, we have the app part that contains also few elements. First, the app part limits this solution only to the internal users. It's not a way to build a fully blown application for your end customers, for the final clients. It's rather something for your internal teams to simplify your work, to add additional value, to provide new functionalities within the Marketing Cloud. It will be available from the AppExchange menu in the Marketing Cloud, so it will be easily accessible. And it will be secure to make sure that no one outside of your organization is able to get there and pull any data out of this place. Okay, so let's start with the super easy part. And here the interesting element is that if any of you is administrator on your Marketing Cloud, feel free to open your Marketing Cloud and follow the steps. And within 1 minute, you will have a first solution ready. Because the first part is adding any link to the AppExchange menu in the Marketing Cloud. And while it sounds very, very simple, it's actually super useful because while of course it is not building a whole application for the Marketing Cloud, it's already perfect tool to, for example, add a link to the documentation that you have on a Confluence or Azure. It's perfect way to integrate your external solution, for example, for metadata tracking directly into the Marketing Cloud, so that your marketers doesn't have to search for a specific place. They can automatically use this solution to get there straight from the Marketing Cloud and within the Marketing Cloud sphere. So there are, as I remember, 8 steps to implement it. First, you need to go to the setup, then to the installed packages, click new in the installed packages screen, provide the name for your package and the description. Here, description is optional. You don't have to provide it, but my recommendation is to always provide here at least the information on the business unit where you are creating your solution, because while it won't be that important for just this part, the menu item, it will be super important later on when we add the API parts for the full application, because the API will be bound to the specific business unit where you are creating this, this item. So if you create this installed package on the parent business unit, it will be using the parent context for the API calls. If you create it on the child, it will have the child context, which might have very important implications if you want to use some specific API endpoints, like, for example, contact deletion that is available only from the parent account. So it's always good to write information, what context of this specific installed package is, because later on, it's not that easy to find this information if you want to come back and find it later on. Then when you click Save on the previous screen, you will see a new component screen with the option to add a new component. You will see the selection of different component types that you can use. And for this place, we will be using the Marketing Cloud app component that allows you to exactly add this menu item to the AppExchange menu. And then you will be providing name. And here the name is the same thing that will be visible in the AppExchange menu. So be aware that what you write here will be what the people will be choosing in the menu. And then you provide the login endpoints. And here you can see that there is login and logout endpoint. Those have some important features when you are thinking about more complex applications, especially AppExchange applications. For the purpose of just this solution, it's not that important, so you can feel free to just add the same thing in both those options. Once you save it, you will already see that this is visible in the menu. The important part here is also that not only what you are doing here will add this menu item to the AppExchange icon, it will also provide you option to manage licenses for this menu item, which means that you can control who and on which business unit will see this menu item, which is great because it means that you can hide the menu item that is not important from people who don't need it and showcase it only to people that are using this specific feature. Okay, so let's jump to the system shortly. And just as I mentioned, you need to go to the setup. In the setup, you will have to select on the left the apps, install packages. And then when you click new install package, it will look like this. So you have the sample link, install package name created on AppExchange business unit. And now if we click this add component button here, select Marketing Cloud app and click next. Then we can write, for example, MD search as a name of the menu item within the AppExchange icon and provide, for example, a link to my search. And then when we save, okay, let me check whether I made anything wrong. If not, I will just try to refresh because maybe it lost the session. Okay, It loads the new icon. Save. And now add component, Marketing Cloud app, MD search. The link. And now it is saved. And you can see that now this installed package contains one component, which is MD search. And what it does is that when I go to the homepage or just refresh the screen to make sure that the Marketing Cloud refreshes after creating of this installed package and hover over the AppExchange menu, you will see here, I hope, the MD search link. And when I click it, it will open my page in this case with still Marketing Cloud menu bar in the top. And you can make a quick search to, for example, find SQL and open it. So you can then work with it already within the Marketing Cloud icon. Of course, this is a bit weird idea, but if you think about, for example, your documentation on your specific implementation of the Marketing Cloud, so that anyone who is working on the Marketing Cloud can quickly jump to a specific information about how some part is built or what the process should be followed to leverage it, it's much better idea. If, for example, before sending a campaign, you need to provide all information about the campaign to your metadata management tool, adding it to a menu item can be a great way to simplify the process and make it faster. Or, for example, if you have an acceptance process where the legal department needs to accept your email and your marketer wants to check quickly whether a specific email was already accepted, they could go to the AppExchange and jump to the system where they can check this information. So super easy, super fast. Within 1 minute, you can have a solution that potentially simplifies a bit the process of your business teams. Okay, let's jump to the next level and see what else is possible if we go to the real Cloud Page App part, which we will need to secure. So firstly, I will go through this screen a bit faster because I was covering it already on another session related to Web Studio architecture, and I will focus only on those elements that are relevant to the Cloud Page Apps. But to give you a high-level picture of what is possible with Cloud Pages in general in terms of the security, you can, of course, hide elements in the AMP-script SSJS, which are backend languages and not visible to customers that visit the website. You can hide it behind ifs, switches, or method checks. You can limit who can get to this page using the referrer information. You can limit who can access the page using the IP allow list, which is especially fun if it's, again, on the internal solution. And for example, you want to limit it only to the users that have your VPN with a specific range of the IP addresses. And finally, things that are more interesting, you can leverage the cookies to make sure that this specific user that is visiting you has your specific cookie that you implemented, for example, as a default cookie for your employees, or that was added in some other process. And finally, the two things that we will be using today is firstly a verification through the data extension lookup, and the key part of this session, the SSO that leverages the Marketing Cloud login screen. And let's focus on this last part for now, because it's, I believe, the most interesting option here, especially for the Cloud Page Apps. How it works. So what it needs is, again, we are going back to our installed packages. And what will need to happen, we will need to add yet another component. This time we will have to choose the API integration component. And within this, we will be selecting web app component. There are a few different components, but what we need is the web app component, because this specific component, what it does is that when you try to authorize through it, it will ask for a username and login to the Marketing Cloud, which is exactly what we want. And when you select this web application, in this moment, you will be seeing such a screen with the properties. You will need to provide the URL to your Cloud Page app, there are two options. I will be covering them in a moment, in which scenario, what URL you will be putting here. And below you will see the scope. And regarding the scope, there are two things. If you plan to only use the SSJS and AIM script to work with your cloud application, you don't need anything in the scope because those languages go without the use of the API this way. However, if you want to leverage some API calls, for example, to use REST API to find details about the journeys or the automations, you will need to select the scope that will be used by your application. The case is to always select as small amount of options as possible to just make it as secure as possible in case anyone would get access to it. So you will be able to see that I will be, for example, sharing the customer key and customer ID for the APIs today for those applications, because I will not be sharing any scope in those APIs. So there's no risk in these terms because it will only do the redirect and authentication. Then when you confirm this screen with the redirect URL, you will see this information displayed in the install package. And the key values that you will need will be the client ID, client secret, and the client base identifier that will be part of all those three URLs, because those parts will be unique to your either org or event specific install package in terms of those values, and will be needed for our Cloud Page app application. And once this is done, the rest is the code part. So let's talk about how this SSO can be implemented into the simple Cloud Page app. And first, what I even mean by a simple Cloud Page app. So there are two approaches to building Cloud Page apps. One is using only a single Cloud Page, and the second is leveraging both Cloud Page for the frontend and Code Restore for the backend. There are pros and cons of each solution, and the best choice depends on what you need to build, what you want to build for your customers. So as for the simple Cloud Page app that is using only a single Cloud Page, the good part is that it's super easy to implement. You have only one Cloud Page to worry about. It's single asset, so you won't have to jump between various assets, and it will be easier to maintain. It still can be interactive because you will be able to leverage front-end JavaScript, modern JavaScript, to make interactions on this front-end. But there are also bad parts. And the bad parts in this case is that whenever the interactions with the JavaScript will not be enough, because, for example, you will need to get a bit more data from the marketing cloud or query a new endpoint, it will mean that you will need to do a reload. And reload, of course, is not that good for the user experience because it will slow down the work with the application, but also it will cost you super messages. Because how it will work, and I will describe it a bit in more detail in a moment, is that the Cloud Page app automatically consumes two super messages, first on authentication and second on opening the Cloud Page app itself. And then if you do any reload, it will consume more super messages. So while it's still not that bad because it will be internal application with probably a limited amount of users that will be using it, it's something to consider if you are low on the Cloud Pages or if you have a big team that will be using this application a lot over the scope of the year, and it can hit your license limits of the super messages. The next part that is the bad part of the simple application is that how the simple application works is that the SSJS and AIM script are processed only when it's loading, which means that if you want to pull, for example, a lot of data, like multiple rows from a data extension to display in this application, you will need to pull it all in the very beginning when the page is loading. And it means that it will be much, much slower the more data you want to pull in this single moment. The load will be slower and the interactions will be slower because hidden in the backend, or rather in the JavaScript later on, will be whole data that you expect the user maybe will be using in this scenario. And another bad part is that it's all-in-one architecture. So in a single Cloud Page app, you will have the HTML, CSS, JavaScript, AMP script, or SSJS, everything in one place. So while it's easier to implement, it's also harder to work with because it will be very long page with a lot of code to read through to understand what it does. So from the architecture point of view, there are two entry points. So the user will be able to either click on the AppExchange menu item. And the interesting thing here is that if you check the URL here, you will see that the URL is not the URL of my page. It's the URL of the Cloud app with the name that we chosen when we created the install package. Or the users, when we are talking about the Cloud Page app, will be able to go straight to the Cloud Page app URL, Cloud Page URL that is generated by the Web Studio. In both cases, Cloud Page will redirect those users to the authentication endpoint. We'll be showing it in the code in a moment. And it will be checked whether the user is logged into the Marketing Cloud. If the user is already in an active session of the Marketing Cloud, this will automatically push the contact further, don't show him the login screen, and process further. If they are not logged in this specific moment, Marketing Cloud will display the default Marketing Cloud login screen, and they will have to log in or won't get access to the application. Once this authentication endpoint is met and it finds that the user is logged in, then it will shoot a post call to get the token endpoint from the authentication data. And this is super important part because this confirms whether the user is eligible to get access to the Cloud Page. Because if the token is generated using the information from the authentication endpoint, it means that the user is valid. If the token is not generated, there is some error, it will mean that the SSO access is invalid. And if the token is granted, it will mean that the Cloud Page can load the SSJS or AMP script to get the data that is necessary. Then it will load the frontend, the HTML, CSS to show the data that it got. And then any interaction that doesn't use SSJS or AMP script just leverages modern JavaScript and can happen directly on the page. But anything that would require another SSJS or AMP script call will require refresh and again pulling the data, loading the front end, consuming the super message. Okay, so how it looks in the real life. So I have your example, but I think we can just create a new one to make it even more interesting for you. So let's jump back to the setup. And apps, install packages, new, live simple app, save. And here we'll need to do two things. First, add component, Marketing Cloud app component to show this application in the AppExchange menu. So for example, my first app. And of course, again, if you have access to the Marketing Cloud, feel free to follow the steps and you will have the solution implemented in the same time as we go. And then we provide the login endpoint and login endpoint. We don't know those yet, so we need to jump to the Web Studio to create a Cloud Page in this case. So Web Studio, Cloud Pages, Cloud Pages apps collection, and let's create a new landing page. My first app. Next, it will be a blank layout. I'm not going for anything fancy today, just for a working solution. And here is the part where on one hand, you provide the HTML, you copy the URL of this Cloud Page and provide this URL of the Cloud Page to both those login and logout endpoints. And now the next part is add another component, the API integration, as I mentioned. And when we click next, select web app application. Next, we provide our cloud page URL here. And I don't select anything in the scope because I just want the authentication, nothing more. Save. And it will generate the API integration with all the keys. Now what will happen is that I will go to the GitHub that I created for you, and I am sharing it already in the chat. And again, I will be sharing it again after the session. And in this GitHub, you will be able to see that there are code snippets that you can use. For example, simple cloud page app template. When we copy this template, and we will going what happens here in a moment to the cloud page. In the top, you will see that there are few variables with super case names. And those are exactly things that we need to change to make it work. So the app name will be my first app. It will be used for the login. Then we need the app URL. So in this case, it will be the same, the link to the cloud page that we are using as application. Then we need the information about our API endpoint. So let's jump here. Client ID, client secret, and client base. So out of this URL, I want only the unique part. So not the HTTPS, not the out marketing cloud APIs. I want just the unique part that is specific to the org. Then there is the need to provide the authentication data extension. The structure for those is already described here in the GitHub that I shared. So you can see Outlook, how it should look in terms of the configuration. I have it prepared to make it faster for today. So let me provide cloud page app Outlook. And then there are two more. We need the error log, cloud page app error log. Again, it is provided in the GitHub what structure is needed. And then we need the error URL. It's in case there's an error, it will redirect to this error URL so we can build it. Again, in the GitHub, there will be, I think I haven't added it yet. Yeah, so I will be adding it today or tomorrow, the template for the very, very basic error page. But for now, it can be whatever, because I don't want to see any errors. Okay, let's publish it. Publish immediately. And now when I go to the home page and refresh the screen, I should see my first app somewhere here. Let's see. My first app, it should be. Yep, here it is. My first app. And when I click it, it will authenticate in the background and in a moment show this hello world information along with my debug that I configured to display. But the key thing here is the hello world. So, okay, let's jump what happens in this application, what this whole code is doing here. So first thing is, again, we are capturing the global variables because we need the information about the application. We need the information about the API endpoint. We need the data extensions to store the information about the authentication and errors, as well as we are capturing some potential query parameters. Let's skip it for now. It will be clear in a moment. Then there you will be able to find two helper functions. They are just for the debugging to make it easier to read and what's happening in the page in case you trigger the debugging to true, as well as a handle error, which is just showing the error content in the page when you are debugging, And when you are in the production, it's adding information to your error.extension log, as well as redirecting to the error page with some parameters that you can later on display to the user. I see a question related to what we are discussing right now from Divya regarding whether it is secure to set a static client ID, client variable in the code. In this case, it is secure because this code is not the front-end code. This is not front-end JavaScript. It is the server-side JavaScript, which means that it's only visible through the Web Studio when you are working on the cloud page. When the cloud page is loaded, so for example, if I go here and click inspect, I won't be able to find any of those elements. So Control F, and let's find client ID. There is no such thing because it's only on the backend and it's completely disappears when you are launching the application, where the page is loading. Okay, so now let's get to the meat. So the authentication flow, which takes the whole security part. So there are few steps that are happening. The first one is that if there are no query parameters that we are capturing here with the platform request get querying parameters, we are going to the first stage of the authentication. So we are generating a specific state, which is just a random GUID. And we are redirecting the user to the authentication endpoint to authorize the user for this specific client ID with the app URL and this unique state. This is the step that checks whether the user is already logged into the Marketing Cloud. And if not, it shows the login screen of the Marketing Cloud to the user. What happens is that because we provided the app URL in this place, after the authentication is validated, it automatically redirects user to this URL, which is the same URL of the same cloud page, but with this state variable added into this URL. This is why we are capturing the state information here in the variables. This means that after the initial authentication, we have this state variable filled in. Then this if is not working because here we are looking only for cases without the state information. So we are jumping to the next step where we need the state. And in this moment, we are capturing the special code that is provided by the authentication, which is captured here with this variable. And then we are building the payload where we are providing this unique code. We are providing the client ID secret again, and again, providing the URL that will be redirecting user to. Optionally, you can also provide here information about, for example, the account ID, so the business unit, which gives you the possibility to, for example, create this install package on the parent, but limit this application on some logic even to a specific business unit in terms of the API context. Once we build this payload, we are shooting a post call to another authentication endpoint, the token endpoint. And in the effect, we are getting a response that should be 200 for the correct token provision. If it is not correct, it means we cannot authenticate. We are triggering the handle error, authentication failed. And this handle error in turn triggers redirect to error URL, making sure that the user is not seeing the cloud page if he does not have the correct authentication. If they are authenticated with the token, what we are doing is we are parsing the response, getting the access token from this response, checking when it will be expire, because the token is valid for around 18 minutes. So this is something that we are doing right here. And with all this, we have optional thing, but something that I really like to do is to use this token to get information about the user. So if we are using the web app type of install package, Because those users are authenticating using their own Marketing Cloud logins, we are able to get information about this specific user. So what is their name? What is their email? And this is exactly something that you see here in the top. This is this user info response, where you can see exactly what's my name and what is my email. So with that said, we are saving this information about the username and user email, and we are abstracting this information to our authentication log data extensions. So we save the state information, the application name, the token, and its longevity, as well as the username and user email. It lets us to understand who accessed the application, when they access the application, and when we have multiple applications, which application was visited. And after this happens, the user, or rather the script finishes, and we are getting to this part after the script. And here we have a very creative hello world text in the free text. But of course, this is the place where all the fun things starts, because you can build here whatever you want. Any AMP script, SSJS, any lookups, custom dashboards, things that are integrating with other external solutions, pulling information from via API from your internal systems. Whatever you need can be done here, and whatever is below this section will be secured with the single sign-on of the application. So this is the simple app, and now it's time for the complex app, which is a bit more complex, because what's the difference? The good part is that all SSJS and AMP script calls are asynchronous, meaning that you don't need to reload the cloud page to be able to get more data from the SSJS. This improves the user experience, but it also means that you don't have to import as many data as you need. You can just get the minimum valuable amount of that information and just provide a load more button, which will asynchronously get another call to get more data and load for example, the dashboard with more and more data as needed for a specific user, which makes it faster and more lean. Next good part is that it's using only one super message, no matter how many interactions happen, because we will be using a code resource. This is just one super message total, and that's all. And it can, as I mentioned, pull more data on demand. So you can create multiple different logics, options, features within this application that are triggered by clicking different things within the application. Still, it supports, of course, the interactions with JavaScript, and it has clean architecture because it will be nicely split with the cloud page containing the frontend, the HTML, CSS, frontend JavaScript, with just like, I think, 4 lines of SSJS, and the backend being fully SSJS or AMP script backend. So there's nice separation of the contexts. There are, however, the bad parts. Again, there is no perfect solution. There are just solutions better for a specific use case. First, it's more complex to implement, not only because it's 2 assets, cloud page and code resource, but also because it will be a bit more complex coding, as we will see in a moment. It requires multiple assets, again, cloud page and code resource, plus the data extension just as before. And as for the flow, the general idea looks generally the same, but what is happening or they're changing here is that the users that click the AppExchange menu item are getting not to the cloud page, but rather to the code resource. And the code resource is checking whether they're logged in, redirecting them, and the code resource is making the post call to get the token. Why? Because it means that we can save one super message, because as we either way are using the code resource, we are not only securing the code resource, which is our backend with the all secret data, but also it's free to launch it. Once the code resource gets the token and validates that the user is okay to see the application, it saves the authentication details to the data extensions that we just were discussing about, and again, is described in the GitHub. And then it redirects to the cloud page. And this is the second part where, again, the cloud page validates the authentication. If the users open the cloud page app directly, not via the AppExchange menu item, it will still validate the authentication, but not with this whole flow, but just by making a lookup to the authentication data extension, which is much faster and much easier. And if the user is not authenticated, meaning that, for example, there is no information about the session, or the data extension doesn't have information about this session, or the token is expired and no longer can be used, they will be redirected back to the beginning, so to the login to Marketing Cloud step. If user is authenticated, we are doing the all good thing, so pull the data with SSJS and name script, we are loading the front end, and then we have the interactions. And the cool thing here, as I mentioned, is that if you don't need SSJS integration, user can interact with modern JavaScript, front-end JavaScript. If user needs interaction, we'll just make an API call from the front end to the code resource. Code resource will process the SSJS or AIM script, give it back in a response, and user will still be able to interact directly on the same page without any reloads, just on the on-demand generated additional content. So how this part looks in the system. First, let's jump to the install package. I won't be configuring it yet again because it's generally exactly the same. There are just two things that you need to consider when building this complex app. What is changing is that instead of providing the cloud page URL to the Marketing Cloud app, and instead of providing cloud page URL to this API integration component, in both cases, you will be providing the code resource URLs. And this is super important because if you provide the wrong URL, it will just show you an error that different URL is expected than what is configured in this application. So for single apps, provide the cloud page URL. For complex apps, provide the code resource URL. Other than that, all the rules are exactly the same as previously. And what's happening here is that, again, we have the Web Studio, but this time we have separate frontend from the separate backend. And if we jump to the main menu and click the complex app, it will be super underwhelming in terms of what it does, but it authenticated. There's this beautiful click me button that when I click, it will show a hello world. And while it looks super lame and not interesting, the fun thing is that the hello world text is not on the cloud page. The hello world is in the code resource. And when I click it, it makes a call to the code resource and get back the hello world and puts it in the cloud page in real time without any reload of this page. So let's jump to how it looks in the code again on the GitHub. So back to the main screen, complex cloud page app. There are now two files, one for the front end, one for the backend. So in terms of the backend, it looks really similar to what you saw previously in the simple app. So all the same global variables, all the same helpers, all the same authentication flow. The only difference is that, again, we are providing here the backend URL, so the code resource URL, not the cloud page URL. The differences start after this final authorization, because what we are doing here is that we are leveraging the, let me find it, method function of SSJS, which tells the SSJS whether the page was opened as a GET or a post context. It means that if someone opens the code resource by just going to the page, or in this case, by selecting the code resource as a menu item in the AppExchange icon, they will trigger the GET context, so just reading context, and it will run the authentication. But when someone clicks the post content, meaning making an API call, for example, it will trigger a completely different flow here. And in this case, when someone makes post, we are no longer making a whole validation, but instead we are getting the posted data, so what was included in the API call. We are checking the provided session in this call and checking whether this session has any token, when the token expires, and we are checking whether this token is already expired or exists. If there is no token, no session, or the token is expired, well, goodbye, nothing else will happen. But if everything is fine, the token exists, we will go to the backend logic part, which is the fun part. And here what I like to do is to build a switch and build this switch on the action, because what it does is that in the payload that I'm shooting from the front end, I'm just providing an action param that has a specific name, for example, my action call. And it lets me create as many cases as I want to, for example, show 20 different actions that the backend can do. And I'm always just doing all the logic, all the AP calls, SSJS calls, whatever you want to do on your backend, and just passing the final outcome in forms of an object to the response variable. Because what I'm doing next is that this response variable is stringified here. And after it is stringified, it's outputted to the code resource. And because this code resource is a JSON code resource, it will mean that it will just output a valid JSON value. And this valid JSON value will be brought back to the frontend. Let's go back to see the frontend. And the frontend, as I mentioned, has only a few lines of the SSJS. It also needs to know what's the app name, what is the authentication data extension, and what is the backend URL. It gets the session information, checks the token. If the token doesn't exist or is expired, it redirects to the backend URL to trigger the authentication once again. After that, there are two more things. One is the frontend, the HTML. In this case, it's this magic button with the label and input that is, as you can see, empty in terms of the frontend. And then there is this script. And the script is, again, capturing the session to be able to pass it back to the backend. It selects the elements of the frontend. And then you have ready-to-use helper functions that are responsible for posting the data. So this one is making asynchronous call. This is the body of the call. It's shooting to the backend URL. And what is happening is that when someone clicks the button, we are sending my action call with a session information to the backend. And when the response comes back, then we take this response and we change the value of our input to response message. So if we go back to the Cloud Page frontend, and this time let's, not this one, sorry. I need to open it from the code resource backend, of course. So I'm opening the code resource. I'm clicking inspect in the same time. You can see that it loaded here. And let's clean it to make it super clear. If I click me on this Cloud Page app, click, it gets the hello world because it makes a post call to our backend. This request uses the session information and the action, and the response is the message hello world that we have configured on the backend. And that's it. Of course, this is, again, super underwhelming, but that's just an example of what is possible. We are building quite a lot with it. So for example, what I can show you, the automation dashboard built by Jura from our team. It's a solution that is using SLDS to test what's the status of all automations within all business units of the solution. So all of this is a Cloud Page that is talking to the backend and getting the data with real-time filtering, which can show the statuses of all automations search full text and show problematic automations that need some information to be, rather needs to be fixed to work correctly. So I would say the sky is the limit. And now going back to the presentation to slowly finish this session for today. If you want more information, there is an article on my site regarding the Cloud Page apps, which showcases step-by-step how to implement this simple Cloud Page app for now. There is my article on code resources, how you can play with the code resources to make your backend and improve the functionality. And there is a link to the GitHub that I pasted on the chat and you were seeing in the session. So you will be able to get it right here. And in terms of the inspiration, there is really cool, fun, simple app by Zuzanna Jarczyńska that looks for the data extension paths within the Marketing Cloud. So she's describing it in nice steps. There are also inspirations for showing that not only Cloud Page app in the standard term is possible, but for example, Sasha Huwald created a custom journey builder activity on the Cloud Page using very similar method. So there is a link to a very interesting thing, how you can later on run SSJS in Journey Builder thanks to the code resources and Cloud Pages. There is then a custom search engine for your browser by Marcin Rzepka. He did not secure it with SSO yet, but it can be secured with SSO and be a Cloud Page or the Cloud Page app. And it lets you find and open any data extension in your system by just using your search bar in the browser. And finally, I really recommend to check the Salesforce Lightning Design System by Salesforce to make building the front end as easy as possible, because they have a lot of ready-to-use components that can just be used for building the front end part of the solution that you want to build. And that's all from my side for today. So now it's time for the questions.
That's very awesome session, Mateusz. There is a lot of useful content in there, and I'm sure the recording will be helpful to the people who wants to rewatch it or the people who have missed it. I'm looking for the questions in the chat window. Anybody has any questions, please post them in the chat window. And I see a lot of great feedback for the session today.
That's cool.
And so I think that is it. I don't see any other questions. So thanks everyone for joining, and special shout out to Mateusz for your time today and sharing all your insights. So the recording and the resources, they'll be shared shortly in the Slack channel and on the YouTube as well. It will be uploaded to the same playlist. So we have 2 other sessions lined up for this year. Be sure to register. And thanks everyone for joining this session.
Thank you very much.
Bye.